Hello. Today we are going to do something that you don't often see on the topic of boundaries. We are going to actually spend more time talking about what a boundary isn't and more time on troubleshooting your boundaries than talking about how to figure them out. My name is Jaylene. I am a personal development coach and founder of Bardo Coaching. The ecosystem of personal development is huge and can be overwhelming. So I'm here to kind of just cut through the noise and highlight information, but give you strategies from my practice that work for you. We are going to talk about boundaries. If you stick with me to the end, you're going to walk away with a really simple guideline that will help you determine if the boundary you have or want is a good one. So many people that I talk to and work with are doing boundaries completely wrong. And honestly, I very often see this cause real problems in a relationship. A lot of you are making a request of someone and calling it a boundary. If you're doing this, you are probably already so frustrated and building up resentment with your people. I'm going to give you a scenario that we're going to beat to death in this lesson. So let's say you have a friend that constantly FaceTimes you without checking in to see if you have the bandwidth to FaceTime and it's making you crazy. So you get frustrated and you tell them, please stop FaceTiming me without asking me first. So then let's say they keep FaceTiming you and you complain to your partner or your other friends that this person keeps violating your boundary. That is not true. You are wrong because you did not set a boundary. You actually made a request of that person to change their actions. They decided not to because free will. So a proper boundary dictates your behavior. It establishes an expectation and a response to that. A real boundary is, hey, I don't always have the bandwidth to FaceTime. I know that you really like to talk via FaceTime. So if you could just check in with me first to see if I'm available. It's my own fault that I'm getting frustrated about this because I know sometimes I answer when I don't want to. So from now on, just to kind of keep myself from building up this resentment, if you forget to text me first, I'm just not going to answer. All right. So I like chatting with you. I hope you'll start texting me first. So that's kind of an example of like the difference between making a request and setting a boundary, right? That's a proper boundary. You have ownership of whether or not you answer the call. So that means you have ownership over whether the boundary is upheld. Setting boundaries is a self-care skill, and you are managing situations that are causing you friction, so you should own the response to it. Okay, so we've covered what a boundary isn't, requesting something. We've talked about the purpose of a boundary, setting an expectation and a response. I'm willing to guess that you have already read about boundaries, seen social media posts, heard friends talk about them. So I don't feel like we need to spend a lot of time explaining them. I'm going to give you 3 simple steps that will help you set a boundary, but then we're going to spend some time on troubleshooting tips if your boundaries aren't working. So 3 simple steps to setting a boundary. Simple, not easy. First is identify where a boundary is needed and what that boundary might be. So this is all you work. This is all personal work. It starts with realizing a certain situation is bothering you or someone's repeated behavior is a problem. So figuring out where the needed boundary is can be tricky, but fortunately for you, of course, I have an idea and a suggestion for you. I have a boundary guideline that when people use it and actually understand it, it can really change your boundary game. So bear with me because I know I said I wasn't going to explain boundaries to you, but this boundary guideline is disguised as a definition of what a boundary is. So I stumbled on this one time and it was like one of a few aha moments for me. The writer's Prentice Hemphill was on a podcast I was listening to and boundaries came up and she said, a boundary is the closest distance at which I can love both you and myself. Okay, at first I thought this was just a fresh take and a new definition, and I loved it, but eventually I realized the answer to what boundary is needed is in that definition. So remember this quote because we're definitely coming back to it. So the first step, you realize you need a boundary and you define the boundary. The second step is really critical, probably the most important part, and that's communication. You have to communicate to the other person what the boundary is. Clear communication in relationships is kindness. There's no better example of that than communicating boundaries. Communication is also probably the area where I see the most breakdown. So we're going to expand on good and bad communication in a minute when we get to troubleshooting. Next up, we have the final step of setting boundaries and a few ways you can troubleshoot your boundary if it's not going well, your boundary life if it's not going well. Before that, a reminder that you can always schedule an absolutely free 20-minute consultation call with me to see if coaching is right for you. In this call, we don't just talk about what coaching is, we actually do some coaching, so you'll leave with some insights. So hit the scheduling link in my bio if you want to check that out. Final boundary step, enforcing it and restating it. You are the guardian of your boundaries. You are going to have to be in charge of enforcing them, which means, hello, do not answer the FaceTime if your friend did not text you first, and possibly restate them. So to recap, you realize you need a boundary, you communicate it, you enforce it. All right, we are at implementation. This should be the real reason why you are here, because everything before this you can find in an internet search in about 30 seconds, right? But the implementation and talking to someone who has implemented these things with people before is kind of where the real juice is of this, I guess. When I'm coaching someone around boundaries and when I'm having a hard time in my personal life, because boundaries is something that I struggle with, these are the typical failure points, these next three things. The first is consider, did I set the right boundary? I'm going to give you a real life example that someone brought to me. So let's say you told your friend you didn't want to be invited to group activities anymore because you prefer a one-on-one time. That's where you thrive. And now you're on your social media and you see everyone in your friend group is out together for the third time. And you're sad and kind of jealous and you feel left out. So you have to put some thought in this case into what a good boundary is for you. And you have to have patience with yourself, especially if boundary setting is new to you. You might swing the pendulum too far if you decide it's boundary time, right? And you just start implementing all of these things. You might think you know what the issue is and you realize I was wrong. That's not actually what was wrong in this situation. Personal development is the process of trial and error, right? To find the right spot for you. Does that mean in this case that you should call your friend and say, just kidding, I'm on my way to the bar? No, please do not do that. It means that feelings are data points and your feelings are telling you something is not right here. If a boundary is the closest distance at which you can love both yourself and the other person, in this case, maybe you put too much distance into the equation. You're not in love with yourself right now on social media, and you're not in love with your friends right now on social media. So mentally move that distance closer. What would feel good right now? What could you do to love yourself more, feel less left out, and love your friend more, feel less jealous? Don't rush to change it. Don't rush through it. Sit with this problem. The next big failure point, and this might actually be kind of the biggest one more than the previous, is communication. So let's say you feel like you have found the right boundary, right? And you know what you want to do, but you haven't communicated it or communicated it properly. That is very confusing to the other person. And honestly, it can feel kind of passive aggressive to the other person. That would look like deciding, I'm never going to answer a FaceTime call again without getting a text first, but you never told your friend that. And then they confront you and you're like, hey, I have a boundary that you aren't respecting. Well, that's not kind. They didn't even know that. If you are changing a behavior that has been in place in an existing relationship and you value that friendship or that person or your integrity, you ought to give the other person a heads up. You don't need their approval. They don't have to agree with this, that this is how it should happen. You just need to inform them one time that, hey, this is how I'm going to handle this going forward. And you can explain it like we did earlier in the video. After you explain it that one time, you do not need to explain it ever again. You might need to restate it as a reminder, like, hey, don't forget, you need to text me before you FaceTime me or I'm not going to answer. But you never have to explain it again. However, not to be confusing, but do not over-explain, do not look for approval, and do not offer justifications. If you strike up a new friendship, and let's say they FaceTime you without texting, this is the easiest thing ever. Don't answer, and then text them and say, oh, I'm sorry, I'm just not always into video calls. I prefer to schedule them or at least know when they're coming in. I'm free tonight at 5 if you want to FaceTime me then. Can't wait to talk to you. You're done. They do not need to know the background. They don't need to know this whole story of oh, I had this friend one time and they always did this and it drove me crazy. There's no justification needed. You just need to tell them, you need to set the expectation of what you expect out of these calls and then move on with your life and let them move on with theirs. Which leads to the third category of troubleshooting, inconsistency or giving up too early. So this was kind of an enforcement problem also. Enforcing a boundary only some of the time is very confusing to the other person, and I think it's confusing to our brains too. So if you are a part-time enforcer, start looking at why. What's going on when you choose not to enforce it? When you're answering that FaceTime when you know you don't want to. Do you feel guilty? Are you lonely? Do you have FOMO? Are you just uncomfortable with feeling uncomfortable? Feelings are data. Use them to find the answer. Or let's say another situation in enforcement is, or enforcing and restating is you throw the towel in way too early. You're not being patient enough for this new thing to kind of take hold. So that would look like this person is never going to stop doing this. It's easier if I just answer the stupid FaceTime and move on. Please do not do this to yourself or to your friend. It's confusing and you're asking for resentment to build up. So be patient, restate the boundary, but do not make the other person's needs more important than your own. So if you noticed, these 3 ways that boundaries fall apart cover the biggest failure point for each step to boundary setting. And they are all 3 ways in which you have autonomy and you have the ability to do something different, which leads me to say kind of like a tough love thing here. If boundaries aren't working, it's probably on you. To be a truly boundary person, you have to be willing and able to take ownership of yourself and your actions and your reactions. And to be clear, is it your fault if your friend never stops FaceTiming you? Obviously it's not, but it's on you if you pick up. And it's on you if you never adjust the boundaries so the distance between you and them is further because they, over a period of time, have just refused to respect your decision, right? You have options beyond, and you're not implementing them. So if you want to start working on this area of your life today, right now, use your new definition of a boundaries as the guideline. Remember, a boundary is the closest distance at which I can love both you and myself. Ask yourself, what do I need to feel good in this relationship where feeling good also means caring for the other person? Sometimes that could mean spending less time or spending no time with someone, but you have to consider both sides and put yourself in the center of that decision. What feels good for me? A lot of times boundaries are fluid or non-existent because we're over prioritizing or over indexing the other person's comfort. So you've got to move yourself into the equation. Remember that everything new takes practice. Personal development works best when you remember that just finding a strategy or learning about something is not personal development. Implementing that idea or strategy through trial and error to find out what works for you is the practice that you need to learn about yourself and build a new skill. Thanks for being here. See you next time.